it's a series of, the work is actually much wider. It's a series of photographies that the artist decided to take in a lapse of about 10 years, right? The artist is Hong Kong photographer called Kwong. I apologize if I mispronounced it, but I absolutely trust my Cantonese. But he's a Hong Kong photographer that was born in the 60s and unfortunately died 40 years later, in the 90s. But the artist, through this work, or actually let me ask anybody, if anybody tell me what do you think is the artist trying to tell us here? If anybody is willing to raise their hand and tell us what is the interpretation, what do you understand when you see this work? Or what do you feel when you see this work? Anybody? How people reconcile with multiculturalism, right? This work started in the body of work started in 1979, which is like the beginning. You can call it it's the beginning of globalization. Yeah, China opened up, and then it kind of like embraced the world fully. Right, the Cultural Revolution is over, and embraced the world. The artist in itself, the artist is Hong Kong born, but he moved to Canada when he was 16 years old. Yeah, so the artist is, his team and professional career developed in the West, but his background is certainly from Hong Kong, so he's primarily Asian, right? So the artist is trying to take, sorry, if we can come closer so we can give space to the people. I think they're trying to pass by. So the artist, when he's saying that you see these changes, these big social changes that are happening, primarily after the 70s, the artist decides to explore that idea of multiculturalism. And this is something, the reason I say that this work has aged really well, because this is something, this confrontation, this exploration that you see here, this is something that we see today on the news, right? So what the artist, and you see, the artist produced the work in the lapse of about 10 years. And at the beginning of the work, what you see is that he's exploiting the stereotypes, as you pointed out, right? So at the beginning, he's taking certainly the dress of the outfit of now, confronting it drastically, very sharply, against the Western stereotype. In this case, the Twin Towers, for those ones old enough to familiarize with the Twin Towers, and the Statue of Liberty, and so on. So, and you see at the beginning, and what I like about this work, and also because when I give these talks, I try not to give it an academic sense because people get bored. I try to present it as my personal take. So what you see about this work, when he started, he was doing that kind of like a stereotypical confrontation between the East and the West. You can see the sense of like immaturity. The artist was about 30 years old when he was when he started this series, right? The East-West series. And at the beginning, certainly, the artist is certainly trying to exploit that confrontation, taking sharper stereotypes one against the other, right? And you're looking for people that are familiar with photography. You see that the composition is quite basic, right? The main character, the background character, and he's trying to exploit a confrontation. So here. It's always the confrontation, cynically, comically, and so on. But there is a confrontation, right, between East and West. But as the artist grows, time passes. So this is like the early 70s when China kind of opening up, and the artist was also relatively a young adult. He was in his 30s. But as time passes by, he continues to do this work. The composition changes. He no longer becomes the confrontation. No longer becomes the main object of the photographer, right? Instead, he replaces it with some sort of like a reconciliation, right? Like an acceptance. Like, this is who I am, and this is my background. Yeah, my background is Asian. My family is from Asia. I grew up in the West. And rather than to have this kind of like a confrontation, I'm going to reflect on it, and I'm going to accept who I am. So in other words, abandon the sharp confrontation and become more calm, to a point that he no longer is the main character of the composition, right? I mean, on this one is clearly he's like right in front. No, this one he lets the background to be, and the background is very calming. So it gives you the sense that you have reconciled with that clash. And this is the reason why I think this work is so relevant today, because in order for us to continue progressing towards a multicultural world, we need to move towards this, to accept that we are different, and we actually take advantage of these differences and try to reconcile them and live in harmony. Because the artist, not only this particular artist, but all the artists that you find in this particular room, this one, the work that we are here, that explores Chinese diaspora, all the artists at one point in the work confronts that idea that eventually have to reconcile with that, with who I am, because you cannot change it. I mean, there's another work by, I don't remember her name, but a Taiwanese artist, the one is called East and West, which is this TV that is a split camera, and she's actually explaining her process of applying for American citizenship. But she is originally from Taiwan, and culturally she's Taiwanese. And she had this confrontation, like, he's asking me these American questions, but this is not who I am. For me, an American passport is something a bit more practical. So I'm taking that advantage, but I'm not going to abandon who I am as a Taiwanese. So this is a similar exercise. The artist decides to eventually, rather than keep confronting and exploiting this stereotype, he decides to accept and reconcile. Also, it's important to say that the artist, the last photo we was taken, actually, I think it's this one, that was taken in 89, if I'm not mistaken, was 1 year before the artist passed. The artist died of AIDS at 40 years old in 1990. But this is the beauty for me that is the work, and the reason, and I find this work very relevant, especially for families in Hong Kong, because it is true that in Hong Kong, being such a global city, people have either families or friends or relatives or that have lived, grown, been abroad. And normally when you have like the family dinner, let's say Chinese New Year and so on, this kind of like a cultural confrontation do happen at home, right? It's true. I mean, I have discussed with my friends, and you have like these guys that come from New York and they try to be like they're better than everybody else. And then you have the grandmother like, no, this is the old tradition, and you have these clashes. And rather to keep confronting, you need to kind of like achieve a certain level of maturity that you need to start accepting. And this is actually, you become defines inner peace by doing that. And I think this is actually something that I do see that is very relevant, that in order to combat, especially what we see especially in the newspapers, is to find that the world is different. And it's actually fine to be different. It's actually what we want. We want the world to be different, to be very diverse. And because what we want to do is to take all this vast universe and ideas and reconcile them and find that inner peace. Because between that multi-universe of diversity, we can find harmony and very good ideas. So that is the reason why I decided to present this work. I wanted to showcase it because it's a work that, in my opinion, has aged really well. The last photo was taken in the late 90s. So a lot of time has passed, and in today's world, I think today's time, I feel that we are kind of like a reverse in that expansion that we have on our globalization, and we're going back to this, right? When we look at the news and so on, we're going back to this, like East versus West. Not East versus West, but now it's like East versus West. And I personally find that this is not the way. And I'm telling you, like me, so because this work is also personal to me. I was born in Colombia, and I have been living here for 15 years. And the reason I love Hong Kong is because I managed to find that harmony, to find the things that I love about Hong Kong and the things that I love about Colombia, and find this kind of sense of harmony, that this can easily coexist, that there's no one better than another one. It's just like multiple ideas that I can get the best out of it. So I invite everybody to, if you have never really seen this work from this perspective, if you think it's something that is new, that perhaps you have a different reading and suddenly like, hey, that was interesting, I invite you to come back perhaps, or come another time, or stay over and look at the work in detail. Because I personally think that this artist is exercised over 10 years. And this body of work, what it's telling us, is something that I think is very relevant for today. For us to live in harmony, like in inner peace, we need to achieve this kind of like a harmony, this cultural harmony within us, in the sense of tolerance and acceptance. So yeah, that was my little talk. I don't know, anybody has a different reading, or anybody wants to share some thoughts? I might understand that someone in Hong Kong might have experienced the situation. So anybody wants to share some thoughts? Especially the young generation, that everything, because the young generation, certainly you guys didn't grow up during the globalized world, when the world was so close. So now the work is very open, so that's kind of like a given. But it wasn't like that. The world went into a massive change, especially in the early 80s. So if nobody has a question, I want to just to say thank you for listening. We have a big group today because the museum is quite crowded. And I really invite you to really walk around this, especially the South Gallery that is exploring abstraction. And abstraction, as people know, is a very difficult topic because the works are very difficult to interpret. So my suggestion is when you're exploring abstraction is try to see the works differently. To try not try to look for a pattern, try to look for a concept. The artists here, especially in all of this wing, the South wing, are exploring concepts, especially more ethereal, less explicit. So I invite you, for example, as you're walking in, there's a beautiful work that is just in this room here to the left, which you can see the transition of China. It's actually part of the holistic collection. So you can see from the earth, like the agrarian China, from very Zen and very nature-based, all the way to a tech China that we see today. And you can see it in the work. So he's exploring that concept, and so on. So I strongly invite you to look at the works and try to understand the concept, right? And to try to find, recognize a pattern and so on. So yeah, thank you very much. If anybody has any questions about this particular the South Wing, do let me know. I do cover this wing as well as the Oldest Wing, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions or show you my favorite works and why they are my favorite works, etc. So I'll be here for a while, so by all means. And no, really, thank you very much. We had a big group, so thank you.